What was meant to be a dream honeymoon in paradise turned into a gruesome nightmare. A newlywed bride, brutally beaten to death inside a luxury resort, by the man she just married. Fiji, known for its idyllic beaches, crystal-clear waters, and luxury resorts, is a place where couples flock to begin their lives together. But for one couple, this remote island would soon become the setting for a tragedy no one could have seen coming. On the surface, it was supposed to be the happiest time of their lives, a celebration of love, an escape from the pressures of everyday life. But behind the postcard-perfect scenery, something terrifying was unfolding. It was a crime that would shock the world, and one that would unravel the hidden darkness of a man who, just days before, had vowed to love and cherish his bride forever. The first calls to the police came just after midnight. A frantic 911 call, describing a woman, beaten and left to die in her luxurious resort room. It wasn't a robbery gone wrong. It wasn't an accident. It was murder. The kind of murder that would raise more questions than answers. A chilling tale of violence from the most unexpected of places. As investigators arrived at the scene, they found a room filled with luxury, but it held the aftermath of a deadly altercation. Blood spattered across the walls, a scene that spoke of desperation, of someone fighting for their life against an overwhelming force. And in the middle of it all stood the man who had promised to protect her, her new husband. But what could have driven a man, who only days before had vowed to spend his life with her, to such a horrifying act of violence? In the days to come, the truth would emerge, piece by piece, revealing a dark and twisted narrative that no one could have imagined. A story of betrayal, obsession, and a honeymoon that would leave a young woman's life in ruins. The question remains, how could love turn into something so horrific? And who was this man who seemed to have hidden his darkest secrets beneath a veil of charm and affection? As we delve into the chilling details of this case, we'll uncover the disturbing truth behind this tragic crime and the shocking twists that followed. Welcome to Hushed True Crime Stories, where both told and untold true crime cases are unraveled, bringing you the darkest mysteries, shocking revelations, and chilling details of real-life crimes. If you're a returning subscriber, thank you for your continued support. And if this is your first time here, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new episode of our deep investigative storytelling. Now, stay tuned as we uncover the details of this unsettling case, because every crime has a story, and every story deserves to be told. This is a story that's more than just a crime. It's a tale of broken trust, shattered dreams, and a man's descent into violence. Stay with us as we unravel the pieces of this heartbreaking tale. Christie Chen was a woman with a bright future. Born and raised in a small town, she had always been known for her warmth and creativity. Her passion for baking led her to pursue a career as a pastry chef, but Christie wasn't content with stopping there. After years of hard work in the kitchen, she decided to make a dramatic shift, trading in her apron for a lab coat and becoming a pharmacist. Her friends and family admired her for her ambition and drive. Christie was the type of person who never settled for less than the best, and she always worked hard to make her dreams come true. She had a kind heart, a welcoming smile, and a willingness to put others before herself. But above all, Christie had a deep love for life. She loved the simple pleasures, a good book, a warm cup of tea, and, of course, baking pastries that would bring joy to others. Her transition to pharmacy wasn't easy, but Christie made it look effortless. She was carving a path for herself, determined to succeed and make a difference in the world. Then there was Bradley Robert Dawson. On the surface, Bradley was everything Christie had hoped for. He was charming, attentive, and had a strong sense of purpose. An IT worker at a children's welfare nonprofit, Bradley seemed to have it all together. His job was to help vulnerable children, an admirable cause, one that mirrored Christie's own passion for helping others. Bradley's friends described him as a quiet man, reserved, but reliable. He had a calm demeanor that put people at ease, a man who knew how to blend into the background but could always be counted on when needed. He wasn't the flashy type, more the kind of person who preferred the simplicity of a good conversation or a quiet evening at home. The two met years before their tragic honeymoon, and their relationship seemed like a fairy tale. From the very beginning, they shared an undeniable connection. Their love was the kind that people envied, a relationship built on trust, companionship, and shared dreams. They had planned every detail of their future together, from their careers to their home to the family they dreamed of starting one day. Christie's friends recalled how happy she was when she met Bradley. She often spoke of him with admiration, describing him as her perfect match. They were the couple that everyone looked up to, the ones who had found their soulmate and were going to spend the rest of their lives together. Bradley, for his part, was equally smitten with Christie. His friends said that he often called her the love of his life, the woman he'd been waiting for. They were a team, supporting each other in their ambitions and in their everyday lives. It seemed as though there was nothing that could tear them apart. They got engaged on a warm summer evening. Bradley proposed in the most romantic way, down on one knee, in front of their favorite restaurant, where they had shared countless memories. Christie was overwhelmed with joy. Their love was the kind of love that made everything feel right in the world. It was the kind of love that led them to the decision to marry, to take that big step, and to build a future together. But in the midst of this fairy tale, there were cracks that would only become visible when it was too late. There were moments in their relationship that Christie's friends later recalled, small hints that something wasn't quite as perfect as it seemed. Bradley's need for control, his occasional jealousy, his tendency to keep things to himself. At first, these were minor red flags, easily dismissed or explained away. After all, every relationship had its challenges, right? But as the wedding day approached, there were whispers of tension between them, tension that Christie brushed off, convinced it was just the stress of planning a wedding. Bradley seemed to grow more withdrawn, more unpredictable. But Christie had always been the optimistic one. She believed in the best in people, especially the man she loved. Their wedding was a beautiful affair, a celebration of their love, their future, and their shared dreams. Surrounded by friends and family, they exchanged vows, promising to stand by each other through thick and thin. To the outside world, they were the perfect couple, two people whose love had blossomed against all odds. But, in the days leading up to their honeymoon, cracks in the facade began to deepen. What was supposed to be a celebration of their new life together would soon become the backdrop to a horrifying tragedy. As Christie boarded the plane with Bradley, her face was full of hope, a vision of what was to come, sun-kissed days on the beach, romantic dinners by candlelight, a future they had dreamed about together. What she couldn't have known, as the plane ascended into the sky, was that her life was about to take a turn into darkness, and the man she loved would become the source of that darkness. This is where their story begins, where a dream honeymoon turned into a nightmare. A nightmare that would soon reveal more than just the hidden secrets of one man, but a deadly side to a relationship that was anything but what it appeared to be. Their honeymoon had begun like so many others, promise in the air, the anticipation of new beginnings, a new life to be explored together. But it was here, on the exclusive, sun-soaked beaches of Fiji, that their dreams would be shattered. Turtle Island Resort. A luxury haven known for its seclusion, natural beauty, and privacy, perfect for high-profile guests who wanted to escape the eyes of the world. This was no ordinary resort. It was an exclusive paradise where the likes of celebrities and royalty had basked in the luxury of its pristine beaches. This was where Christie and Bradley chose to begin their journey as husband and wife. For them, it was supposed to be a fairy tale, a secluded escape, a honeymoon surrounded by crystal-clear waters, lush green hills, and quiet nights under the stars. The resort itself was a picture-perfect retreat, made famous by the 1980 film The Blue Lagoon, filmed on its very shores. A place known for its tranquility, breathtaking views, and a peaceful aura that welcomed newlyweds like them, promising a getaway to remember. But this paradise, hidden away on the island, was about to become the scene of unimaginable horror. The couple's arrival was met with the standard luxury treatment, greeted with a glass of champagne, escorted to their private bungalow, the scent of the ocean filling the air as they settled into their idyllic surroundings. Bradley and Christie were ready to embrace the peaceful days ahead, or so it seemed. In the first few days, they enjoyed the perfect honeymoon. They went on excursions around the island, snorkeled in the turquoise waters, and dined under the stars. On the surface, everything seemed flawless. But behind the gleaming exterior of their honeymoon bliss, something was changing. As the days passed, small signs started to appear, tiny details that no one could have predicted would lead to a tragedy. A brief, sharp look exchanged over dinner, an awkward silence during a walk along the beach, a momentary glance where Christie seemed uncomfortable, though she quickly dismissed it. It wasn't until the night before the murder that the tension became evident. The couple had dinner at the resort's exclusive restaurant, a romantic, candlelit setting with breathtaking views of the ocean. But this evening would be different. The calm atmosphere of the resort suddenly became clouded by a heated argument between Christie and Bradley. Witnesses, staff members who had been serving them that evening, would later recall the raised voices, the sharp words exchanged across the table. Christie, normally warm and composed, was visibly upset. Bradley, who had been quiet for most of the evening, appeared agitated, his face flushed with anger. One of the staff members remembered hearing Bradley's voice rise, demanding something from Christie, though the details were unclear. Christie seemed to recoil, her body language stiffening as the tension between them escalated. At one point, she stood up abruptly, clearly distressed, and excused herself from the table. Bradley remained seated, his jaw clenched. The staff member who witnessed this moment was struck by the sudden shift in their demeanor. What had started as an idyllic honeymoon now seemed, in that brief moment, much darker. As the couple left the restaurant, it was clear something had shifted. The happy newlyweds were now engulfed in something unspoken, a rift that no one could have anticipated. The resort staff watched as they disappeared into the night, wondering if it was just a temporary disagreement or the beginning of something far more serious. The morning of July 9, 2022, began with no sign of what was to come. The sun rose over the horizon, casting a warm glow over the turquoise waters, but something felt off. The newlyweds, who had been so vibrant and lively just days before, were nowhere to be seen. It wasn't unusual for honeymooners to sleep in late, especially after a late night. But as the hours ticked by, staff at the resort began to notice that Christie and Bradley had missed both breakfast and lunch. Concern began to grow, as this was not like the couple they had met just days earlier. Staff members quietly checked the couple's bungalow, hoping to find them simply sleeping or relaxing in the comfort of their room. But when they knocked on the door and received no response, their concern deepened. Something didn't feel right. They knocked again, a bit louder this time, and again there was no response. With each passing minute, the feeling of unease grew stronger. A staff member, now visibly worried, made the decision to enter the bungalow. As they turned the handle and stepped inside, what they found would send chills through them, a scene that would forever haunt their memories. Christie Chen, the bright, talented woman who had arrived just days before with a radiant smile, now lay motionless on the floor. Blood pooled beneath her head, staining the floor, soaking into the fabric of what had once been a luxurious retreat. The sight was shocking, violent, devastating, and far removed from the love-filled days that were supposed to define this trip. Her injuries told a story no one wanted to believe. The once vibrant pastry chef turned pharmacist, a woman who had built a career on precision and care, had suffered repeated blows to the head. Not just one, but multiple, each one intentional, each one delivering a force that left no doubt. This was no accident. Someone had done this to her. And whoever had left her here, alone. For a moment, there was silence. The kind of silence that comes when the mind struggles to process what the eyes are seeing. Then, panic. A staff member gasped, another stumbled backward. Someone ran to call for help. The resort's peaceful atmosphere had been shattered in an instant. But there was something else. Something that made the horror even worse. Bradley Dawson was gone. The man who had arrived with Christie, the man she had married, the man she had trusted with her future, nowhere to be found. His belongings were still in the bungalow, his shoes by the door, his suitcase open, but he was missing. No note. No explanation. No sign of where he had gone or why he had left her like this. Staff members exchanged looks, their minds racing. A tragic accident. A crime of passion. A moment of uncontrollable rage. The possibilities were endless, but one thing was clear. Suspicion had only one direction to go. Bradley. The police were contacted immediately. A crime of this nature, especially on an exclusive island, was unheard of. This wasn't just any resort. It was one of the most private, well-guarded retreats in Fiji. No unauthorized guests. No easy way on or off the island. It was supposed to be a place where safety was guaranteed, where the outside world couldn't intrude. Yet here they were. The authorities responded quickly, their boat cutting across the clear waters toward Turtle Island. As they arrived, resort staff stood in shocked silence, waiting for someone, anyone, to make sense of what had happened. Inside the bungalow, officers examined the scene. Blood spattered on the floor, signs of a struggle, and an eerie, unnatural stillness that left them uneasy. Christie had been dead for hours. And Bradley vanished. A manhunt was now underway. A search that would take authorities through the winding paths of the island, through the thick jungle, to places where no one had expected to look. What had happened between them in that bungalow? Where had Bradley gone? And the biggest question of all, what had led to this moment? As the sun set over Turtle Island, the resort was no longer the paradise it had been just hours before. The soft golden glow that once felt warm and inviting now cast long, uneasy shadows. A woman was dead. And the man who had promised to love her for a lifetime was missing. Bradley Dawson had vanished, leaving behind more questions than answers. Inside the bungalow, investigators searched for clues. His phone was still there, resting on the bedside table. His GPS watch, the kind that tracks every step and movement, had also been left behind. It was almost as if he had abandoned them on purpose, knowing they could reveal his location. But what he did take was even more telling. His wallet. His passport. Two things no one would need unless they planned to leave. Authorities didn't believe this was a man who had run away in confusion or grief. This wasn't someone who had fled in a blind panic. This was someone who had made a choice. And that choice. Escape. Somewhere, in the darkness of the island, Bradley was out there. And time was running out to find him. The ocean was calm that night. The waves lapped gently against the shore, their rhythm steady, predictable. But something had disturbed that peace. Something barely noticeable in the vastness of the open water. A single kayak. Bradley had taken one from the resort, pushing it into the sea, paddling into the night. The island was small, but the ocean was endless. Did he have a plan? A destination? Or was he simply trying to get as far away as possible, hoping the water would hide him? Authorities weren't sure yet. What they did know was that he was gone. And the hunt had begun. News of the crime spread fast. The luxury resort, the brutal murder, the missing husband, it was the kind of case that no one could ignore. Fijian authorities launched a full-scale search. Every inch of the island was combed through, every trail examined, every possible hiding spot checked. But there was nothing. No sign of him. Then, 36 hours later, a breakthrough. More than a mile away from the resort, on another island, they found him. A man alone. Exhausted. Wearing the same clothes from the night before. When they approached, he didn't run. He didn't fight. He simply looked at them, his face blank, his body slumped with fatigue. And then, in a quiet voice, he spoke. He told them he hadn't meant to run. He said he was in shock. That he hadn't known what to do. That paddling away in a kayak, disappearing for a day and a half, was never part of some grand escape plan. It was panic, he insisted. Nothing more. But to the officers who arrested him, his words didn't match his actions. A man in shock doesn't take his passport. A man in shock doesn't leave behind his phone, his GPS watch, the very things that could have helped investigators track him. This wasn't panic. This was something else. And now, with him in custody, the real questions could begin. Bradley Dawson was no longer a free man. The world that once seemed so full of promise, a new marriage, a luxurious honeymoon, had collapsed into something cold and unrecognizable. The moment the handcuffs clicked around his wrists, everything changed. He was no longer a husband. He was a suspect. But as he sat in a small, dimly lit holding cell, waiting for the legal process to unfold, one question remained unanswered. Would he ever be anything else? When the charges were read, Dawson did not hesitate. He pleaded not guilty. His defense. Christie's death had been an accident. He claimed that they had been drinking that night, that emotions had run high, that things had gotten out of control. But he never meant to hurt her. He certainly never meant to kill her. To those listening, it was a bold claim. The prosecution, however, saw things differently. They weren't interested in explanations. They had evidence, gruesome, undeniable evidence. Crime scene photos painted a horrifying picture. The walls, the floor, the bed, streaked with blood. Christie hadn't suffered a single fatal injury. She had endured multiple blows to the head, each one more violent than the last. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a moment of passion gone too far. This was an attack. A relentless, merciless attack. And as prosecutors laid out the case, the jury would have to ask themselves one critical question. If this was an accident, why did Christie fight back? For nearly 2 years, the case dragged on. Legal motions, delays, preparations. But in 2024, the trial finally began. It was a high-profile case, one that drew international attention. The courtroom was filled with reporters, legal experts, and spectators, all waiting to hear how a honeymoon in paradise had ended in unimaginable violence. The prosecution wasted no time. They called witnesses, resort staff who had overheard the argument, medical experts who detailed the extent of Christie's injuries, forensic specialists who described what had happened inside that bungalow. The evidence was overwhelming. Dawson's legal team tried to push back, but their defense was weak. They claimed that Christie had fallen. That Dawson had been too drunk to remember exactly what happened. That he panicked. But the injuries told a different story. A fall does not leave behind the kind of damage Christie suffered. A fall does not explain the defensive wounds on her hands. A fall does not cause multiple impacts to the head. This wasn't a single moment of poor judgment. This was sustained, brutal violence. When the judge prepared to deliver the verdict, the courtroom fell silent. Dawson sat motionless, his hands clenched together. The weight of what was about to happen settled over him like a thick, suffocating fog. And then the words came. Guilty. The accident defense? Rejected. The claims of panic? Disregarded. The evidence was too strong. The injuries too severe. The brutality too obvious. The prosecution had proven their case beyond a reasonable doubt. Christie Chen had been murdered. And now, justice had finally caught up with the man responsible. Violence leaves a mark. Not just on the body, but on the lives it touches. On the families who are left behind. On the investigators who have to document every gruesome detail. On the strangers who hear the story and wonder, how could this happen? For Christie's loved ones, the pain of losing her was only made worse by what they learned in the weeks that followed. The brutality of the crime was shocking. It was cruel. It was inescapable. And in the end, it meant that they would never get to say goodbye the way they wanted. When authorities examined Christie's body, the truth became clear. This was not a single moment of violence. This was sustained, relentless, and personal. Her injuries told a horrifying story. Her head had been struck over and over again, the force so extreme that it left her face unrecognizable. Her hands bore signs of defense wounds, proof that she had fought back, that she had tried to protect herself, that she had struggled to survive. But she never had a chance. The violence was so severe that it left her body in a state beyond repair. Even in death, there was no peace. The damage was so extensive that embalming was impossible. Her family, already drowning in grief, faced another impossible reality. They couldn't bring her home the way they had hoped. They couldn't give her the burial she deserved. Instead, they were forced to make a heartbreaking decision, to have her remains cremated in Fiji before bringing her back to the United States. It was yet another cruelty in a story already filled with too many. How does something like this happen? How does a marriage, only days old, end in such horror? Experts in domestic violence studied the case closely. And the more they looked, the more they recognized the signs. The argument at dinner. The tension witnessed by resort staff. The way Christie's body showed evidence of a struggle. To those who understand abusive relationships, these details were all too familiar. Was this the first time Dawson had hurt Christie? Or had there been signs before, warnings that were ignored or dismissed? Her friends and family would never know for sure. There was no record of previous abuse. No reports to the police. No documented history of violence. But that didn't mean it hadn't happened. Many victims of domestic violence suffer in silence, either out of fear, love, or hope that things will get better. Sometimes, the first attack is also the last, because it ends in tragedy. For Christie, the truth would never be fully known. But one fact remained: she should have had a lifetime ahead of her. She should have had the chance to celebrate anniversaries, to travel the world, to grow old surrounded by the people who loved her. Instead, her life was taken in the most violent way possible. And all that was left were questions. Questions that would never have answers. Justice does not bring back the dead. It does not erase the pain. It does not restore what was lost. But it is the only thing left for those who remain, the only thing that can provide even the smallest sense of closure. For Christie's family, the trial was long and painful. The details of what had happened to her were almost too much to bear. Every piece of evidence, every testimony, was a reminder of the horror she had endured. And now, after months of waiting, the moment had arrived. The courtroom was silent as the judge prepared to read the sentence. Bradley Dawson stood before the court, his face emotionless. His defense had argued that Christie's death was an accident, that he had panicked, that he had never meant to harm her. But the evidence told a different story. The prosecution had laid out the facts, the violent injuries, the attempt to flee, the missing phone and watch. The argument at dinner. The warning signs. The truth was undeniable. And now, there would be consequences. The judge's voice was steady, unwavering. A life sentence in Fiji. The details of parole eligibility still undecided, but the message was clear. Dawson would spend the rest of his days behind bars. For some, it was justice. But for others, it was not enough. This case had reached far beyond the shores of Fiji. It had sparked international debates. What happens when a crime is committed on foreign soil? Should the accused be tried in their home country or where the crime occurred? And what role does the victim's family play in that decision? For Christie's loved ones, the answer was simple. They wanted accountability. They wanted the world to know what had happened to her. They wanted to make sure no one else suffered the same fate. When the verdict was announced, Christie's family sat in the courtroom, holding hands, their grief visible on their faces. They had lost a daughter, a sister, a friend. Nothing would bring her back. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered, waiting for a statement. Her parents spoke first. Their voices were steady, but the pain was evident. They thanked the Fijian authorities, the legal teams, the people who had fought for justice. But there was no celebration. No relief. Only loss. Christie had been full of life, they said. She had dreams. She had a future. And it was stolen from her. Then, her family turned their grief into a mission. They spoke about domestic violence, how it hides behind closed doors, how it is too often ignored until it's too late. They called for stronger awareness, better protections, more support for victims before tragedy strikes. Their message was clear. Christie's story could not end here. Because somewhere, right now, another woman is in danger. Another argument is escalating. Another life is hanging in the balance. And for Christie's family, that is the fight that remains. Around the world, countless others suffer in silence. Abuse does not always start with violence. It begins with control, with manipulation, with small moments that don't seem alarming, until they are. Friends and family had seen the couple's love. They had seen the smiles, the laughter, the plans for the future. But what they didn't see were the warning signs. The tensions that had been hidden. The moments of fear that were masked behind forced smiles. Domestic violence does not always leave visible scars. Sometimes, it is in the words left unspoken. The isolation. The fear of doing or saying the wrong thing. The constant effort to keep the peace, to avoid conflict, to stay safe. And far too often, it ends in tragedy. But it doesn't have to. If you or someone you know is experiencing abuse, there is help. There is a way out. There are people who will listen, who will believe you, who will fight for your safety. No one should have to live in fear. No one should have to wonder if the person they love will one day become their worst nightmare. Christie's family will never get her back. But her story can serve as a warning, a lesson, and a call for change. If her story has resonated with you, if you believe in the importance of bringing these cases to light, like and share this story. Talk about it, share your thoughts in the comments section, and subscribe to this channel for more true crime tales. And if you or someone you know is in danger, reach out. You are not alone. Help is available. Christie's story ended in tragedy. But maybe, just maybe, her story can help save someone else.